Hello. I met Lisa on a rainy evening in October. It wasn't anything dramatic. No bumping into each other in a coffee shop, no spilled drinks or missed trains. Just a simple introduction at a mutual friend's party. The music was too loud, the room was packed, and I was halfway through a conversation I wasn't really interested in when she walked in. Lisa had this energy about her, like she belonged wherever she was, like the room adjusted itself to fit her presence. She wasn't the kind of person who needed attention, but she got it anyway. I noticed her right away, not just because of how she looked, but because of how easily she moved through the crowd, laughing, talking, making people feel like they had known her forever. When we were finally introduced, she shook my hand and smiled. "You don't look like you're having fun," she said, her voice teasing. "I thought I was hiding it well," I replied. "You weren't." And just like that, we were talking. About nothing in particular at first. Music, movies, the best pizza place in the city. But then it turned into something more, something deeper. She had opinions, strong ones, and she wasn't afraid to argue them. She made me laugh, made me think. I didn't even realize how much time had passed until our friend interrupted to ask if we were going to spend the whole night in the corner talking. I got her number before I left. I don't think I had ever been so sure about someone after just one conversation. Our first date was a week later. A late-night diner, endless cups of coffee, and hours of conversation that made me forget everything else. I didn't want the night to end, and neither did she. That was the beginning. And at the time, I thought it was the best beginning I could ever ask for. Lisa and I clicked so effortlessly that everything after that first date just fell into place. We spent nearly every free moment together, exploring the city, trying new restaurants, and laughing over the dumbest things. She had this way of making ordinary moments feel special, turning grocery runs into little adventures, making lazy Sundays feel like the best days of my life. A year into dating, we moved in together. It wasn't a tough decision, it just made sense. We were already spending most nights at each other's places, and I hated saying goodbye to her at the end of the day. So, we found a small apartment downtown, a one-bedroom with creaky wooden floors and a tiny balcony that overlooked the street. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. Lisa made the place feel like home almost instantly. She had a knack for decorating, for picking out the little things that made a space warm and inviting. I was happy to let her take the lead, as long as I got a say in the couch. We spent our first night there eating takeout on the floor, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes, laughing about how unprepared we were for actual adulthood. We had our routines, our inside jokes, our shared habits. Sunday mornings meant pancakes and jazz music playing in the background. Friday nights were for movie marathons, each of us taking turns picking a film. We argued over silly things, whether pineapple belonged on pizza. It didn't, in my opinion, but she swore by it. Who used the last of the toothpaste, whose turn it was to take out the trash. But we always made up, always found our way back to each other. 3 years in, I proposed. It wasn't anything elaborate. Just a quiet night at home, a home-cooked meal, and a ring that I had spent weeks picking out. Lisa cried when she saw it, then tackled me in a hug before she even said yes. But she did say it, and in that moment, I felt like the luckiest man alive. Our wedding was small, just close friends and family, held in a little garden venue outside the city. I remember the way she looked that day, happy, radiant, like she had stepped right out of a dream. I remember the vows, the laughter, the way she squeezed my hand as we walked back down the aisle together. Marriage didn't change much for us. We were already a team, already partners in everything. If anything, it just made what we had feel more solid, more permanent. We built a good life together. And for a long time, I believed it was everything I had ever wanted. After we got married, life settled into a comfortable rhythm. We bought a house in a quiet neighborhood, a cozy 2-bedroom with a little backyard and a porch that Lisa immediately decorated with string lights. It wasn't the biggest or the fanciest, but it was perfect for us. She always talked about how she wanted a place that felt warm, lived in, like something out of a storybook. So, she filled it with soft blankets, framed pictures from our travels, and little plants that I was convinced I'd accidentally kill within a month. We both worked hard, but made sure to carve out time for each other. Lisa had a job in marketing, something she loved and excelled at, while I worked in software development. Our schedules didn't always line up perfectly, but we made it work. On the nights we were both home, we'd cook dinner together, well, Lisa would cook, and I'd chop vegetables under her supervision. We'd sit on the couch afterward, her feet tucked under my leg as we watched whatever show we were currently obsessed with. Weekends were for small adventures, road trips to nearby towns, hiking trails we had never tried before, or just lazy mornings drinking coffee on the porch. Lisa loved hosting, so every couple of months, she'd organize game nights with friends or little dinner parties where she'd show off some new recipe she found. I wasn't much of a social butterfly, but seeing her in her element, laughing, telling stories, making sure everyone felt at home, made it impossible not to enjoy myself. Of course, it wasn't always perfect. No marriages. We had our share of disagreements, sometimes over small things, like how she never refilled the gas tank until the last minute, or how I always left my socks on the floor. Other times, it was bigger, like when we talked about starting a family. Lisa wasn't sure she wanted kids, while I had always pictured myself as a dad. It was a discussion that stretched over months, neither of us wanting to pressure the other, both trying to find a middle ground. In the end, we agreed to wait and see. Still, through it all, I never doubted us. She was my best friend, my partner, the person I wanted to grow old with. And for years, that was enough. Life was good. At least, I thought it was. It started as an ordinary evening. Lisa and I were sitting on the couch, the glow of the TV flickering across the room, half watching a show while scrolling through our phones. It was one of those comfortable silences, the kind that comes with years of being together. Then, out of nowhere, she put her phone down, turned to me, and said, "I've been thinking about something." I glanced at her. Yeah. She hesitated, chewing on her lip like she was searching for the right words. That should have been my first clue. Lisa was never one to struggle with words. "Have you ever thought about opening up our marriage?" For a moment, I thought I had misheard her. "What?" She exhaled, like she had been holding her breath. "An open marriage. You know, just seeing other people while still being together." I laughed, because it had to be a joke. But when I looked at her, she wasn't laughing. She wasn't even smiling. My stomach tightened. "Lisa, where is this coming from?" She shrugged, too casually. "I don't know. I've just been reading about it, and it seems like a lot of couples do it. It keeps things exciting, keeps people from feeling stuck. I mean, we've been together for years. Maybe it would be good for us." I felt like I had been punched in the gut. "Good for us." She sighed. "Look, I love you. That hasn't changed. I'm just saying, maybe it wouldn't be a bad thing to explore. No secrets, no sneaking around, just honesty. If we both agreed to it, it wouldn't even be cheating." I stared at her, trying to understand how the woman I had built a life with, the woman who had once cried happy tears when I proposed, was sitting here suggesting that we bring other people into our marriage. Like it was nothing. "No," I said finally, my voice firm. "That's not what I want." Lisa shifted uncomfortably. "I just think." "No," I cut her off. "Lisa, we made vows. This isn't some experimental dating phase. We're married. If you want to be with other people, then you don't want to be married to me." She looked away, her jaw tightening. "I'm not saying that." "Then what are you saying?" She didn't answer. And in that silence, something between us cracked. I had always thought we were solid, unshakable. But for the first time, I felt like I was standing on unsteady ground. And I had no idea how much worse it was going to get. After that conversation, something changed. Maybe it was just in my head at first, the way a single crack in glass can go unnoticed until it starts spreading. But I felt it. The shift. The weight of something unspoken settling between us. Lisa didn't bring up the open marriage idea again, and I tried to convince myself that it was just a passing thought, a stupid conversation we could forget about. But I couldn't forget it. The words sat in the back of my mind like an itch I couldn't scratch, resurfacing every time she stayed out later than usual, every time she smiled a little too long at a message on her phone. At first, I told myself I was overreacting. We had been together for years. Lisa wasn't the type to cheat. We had trust. That's what I kept repeating to myself, like a mantra. But then little things started piling up. She became more protective of her phone. Lisa had never been secretive about it before. We used to share playlists, send each other funny memes, even look up restaurant menus together. Now, she was different. If I walked into the room while she was texting, she'd tilt the screen away just slightly, barely noticeable, but enough to set off alarm bells in my head. If I playfully reached for her phone, she'd pull it back, laughing it off as if it were nothing. "Work stuff," she'd say, or, "just a dumb group chat." She started dressing differently, too. Lisa had always been effortlessly beautiful, But now she was putting extra thought into everything. The kind of thought you have when you're trying to impress someone. New lingerie, perfume I'd never smelled before, dresses that hugged her body in a way she never used to care about. When I complimented her, she'd smile, but there was something distant in her eyes, like she was soaking up the praise but not really hearing me. Then there were the nights she started coming home late. She had always been social, but now she was grabbing drinks with coworkers more often, working late on projects she had never mentioned before. When I asked about it, she had explanations, always reasonable, always airtight. But they felt rehearsed, too smooth, too perfect. And the worst part? I had no proof. Just a gnawing feeling in my gut that something wasn't right. I started paying attention in ways I never had before. Noticing how often she checked her reflection before leaving the house. How her phone would light up late at night with notifications she ignored. I listened to the way she spoke about her day, looking for inconsistencies, holes in her stories. The first time I asked her directly, she laughed. "You're being paranoid," she said, ruffling my hair like I was some jealous fool. I wouldn't have even brought up an open marriage if I was sneaking around. That's the opposite of cheating, isn't it? I didn't have an answer for that, so I let it go. But the feeling didn't go away. One night, she came home late, later than usual. I was already in bed, pretending to be asleep when she slipped in beside me. She smelled different. Not like the floral perfume she had started wearing, but like sweat and faded cologne that wasn't mine. I kept my eyes closed, breathing steadily, pretending not to notice. But I did. And for the first time, I started wondering if I was losing my wife. Or if I already had. The feeling wouldn't go away. It clung to me like a shadow, always lurking in the back of my mind, whispering doubts into every quiet moment. I tried to push it aside, to act normal, to believe Lisa when she smiled at me like nothing had changed. But it had. I started paying attention to everything. I wasn't trying to be obsessive. I wasn't scrolling through her phone or following her around, but I noticed things. And once I started noticing, I couldn't stop. Lisa's work schedule became unpredictable. She was staying late, more often, yet when I asked her about projects she was working on, her answers were vague. She always had an excuse, though. A deadline, a team meeting, a new client. Nothing I could call her out on without sounding paranoid. Her phone was practically glued to her hand now. She never used to care if she left it on the counter, but lately, it was always with her, clutched in her hand, face down on the table, or tucked into her pocket. If I walked into the room while she was texting, she'd casually lock the screen, as if it were a reflex. Then there was the way she was around me. She wasn't cruel. She wasn't distant, not in an obvious way. But she was different. She laughed at my jokes, but it felt forced. She kissed me, but it felt routine, like muscle memory rather than desire. One night, I tried to initiate intimacy. We hadn't been as close lately, and I wanted to break whatever invisible wall had formed between us. She hesitated, just for a second, before forcing a smile. "I'm exhausted," she murmured, placing a hand on my chest. "Rain check." I nodded, pretending not to notice the way she turned away too quickly. I started testing little things, just to see her reaction. I asked if she wanted to have a spontaneous date night. Just the two of us, no distractions. She looked guilty for a fraction of a second before she recovered, smiling and saying, "Oh, babe, I already told the girls I'd meet them for drinks tonight." Rain check. Another rain check. Then came the moment I couldn't ignore. It was a Saturday morning, and Lisa was in the shower. Her phone was charging on the nightstand, screen lighting up with a notification. I wasn't trying to snoop. I wasn't that guy, but my eyes flicked over to it anyway. A name I didn't recognize. Just an initial. D. And the message underneath? "Last night was amazing. Can't stop thinking about it." I stared at the screen, my stomach twisting. It could have been innocent. Maybe it was one of her girlfriends being dramatic. Maybe it was an inside joke. Maybe. But I knew. I knew. I didn't touch the phone. I didn't say anything. I just sat there, staring at the message, my heart pounding. When Lisa walked back into the room, towel wrapped around her body, she smiled at me like nothing was wrong. "What?" she asked, laughing lightly. "Why are you looking at me like that?" I forced a smile. No reason. But inside, something snapped into place. I wasn't imagining things. I wasn't being paranoid. Lisa was hiding something, and I was going to find out what. Something had shifted between us, and no matter how much Lisa tried to act like everything was normal, I could feel it. It was in the way she spoke to me, her voice a little too light, a little too rehearsed. It was in the way she touched me, when she remembered to, like she was going through the motions rather than wanting to be close. It was in the way she carried her phone everywhere, keeping it within arm's reach as if it held secrets too dangerous to be left unattended. But the worst part? She still looked at me like she loved me. And maybe, in some twisted way, she thought she did. Maybe in her mind, she wasn't doing anything wrong. Maybe she had convinced herself that I wouldn't understand, that I was the one holding her back from some greater truth about herself. I tried to ignore the doubts at first, tried to shake off the paranoia gnawing at the edges of my thoughts. But paranoia doesn't just go away. Not when there are signs, little pieces of evidence that don't quite fit, moments that don't make sense no matter how hard you try to justify them. The late nights, the extra effort in her appearance, the text from someone named D that I had seen flashing on her screen. I could have asked her about it. I could have confronted her right then and there, demanded answers, given her a chance to come clean. But I didn't. Maybe I was afraid of hearing the truth. Maybe I wanted to see how deep this went before I tipped my hand. So instead, I watched. Not in an obvious way. I didn't interrogate her, didn't snoop through her messages when she wasn't looking. But I paid attention. I started keeping track of things. What time she left, what time she came home, whether she smelled different when she walked through the door. I noticed the way she hesitated before answering certain questions, how she always had just the right excuse lined up, never missing a beat. One night, while she was in the shower, I sat on the couch staring at the darkened TV screen, my mind running in circles. I felt like a fool, like I was grasping at shadows, desperate to believe that I was just imagining things, that my wife, the woman I had built a life with, wasn't lying to my face. But then something happened that I couldn't ignore. Lisa had always been affectionate. Even when we were busy, even when life got hectic, she would still reach for my hand absent-mindedly, still kiss me on the cheek as she passed by, still find little ways to let me know she saw me. But lately, those little gestures had started disappearing. I told myself it was stress, that she was tired, that maybe I had been distant too, and this was just something we needed to work through. And yet, when her phone rang that night, I watched her face carefully. She was sitting across from me at the kitchen table, sipping a glass of wine, scrolling through her phone like she was half distracted. But the moment the screen lit up, her whole body stiffened. It was subtle, just a slight tension in her shoulders, but I saw it. She turned the phone over immediately, pressing it against the table as if she hadn't even noticed the call. I cleared my throat. "Aren't you going to answer that?" She barely looked up. "It's no one important." Her voice was casual. Too casual. I nodded slowly, pretending to believe her, pretending I wasn't counting the seconds as she sat there, waiting for the ringing to stop. My stomach twisted as she lifted the glass to her lips, taking a long sip like she was trying to steady herself. That was the moment I knew. It wasn't just in my head. It wasn't just me being paranoid. Lisa was hiding something. I didn't know what, not yet. But I was going to find out. And when I did, there would be no more pretending. The night it all unraveled started like any other. Lisa had told me she was going out for dinner with some coworkers, a casual team bonding kind of thing. I acted like I believed her, even smiled when she kissed me on the cheek before leaving. But I didn't believe her. Not anymore. I sat in the living room, staring at nothing, my thoughts racing. I had spent weeks second-guessing myself, trying to convince myself that my suspicions were just in my head. But I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overreacting. Lisa had changed, and I knew there was a reason for it. I just didn't have proof. Then I remembered the cameras. When we bought the house, I had installed a small home security system, just a couple of cameras in key areas, mainly for safety. One at the front door, another in the living room, and one in the hallway leading to the bedrooms. We rarely ever checked the footage unless we were out of town, but in that moment, a sickening thought hit me. What if she's bringing someone here? The idea sent a chill down my spine. The thought of Lisa betraying me was already unbearable, but the thought of her doing it in our home, in the place we built together, that was something else entirely. I hesitated for a long moment, fingers hovering over my laptop as I debated whether I really wanted to know the truth. But deep down, I already did. And there was no turning back now. With a deep breath, I opened the security app and started scrolling through the motion-triggered recordings. Most of them were just of me moving around the house, going to work, coming home. But then I saw it. A notification from earlier that evening, after Lisa had supposedly left for dinner. I clicked on it, and the footage loaded. The front door camera showed Lisa unlocking the door and stepping inside with someone else. A man. Tall, well-built, wearing a dark jacket. His face was partially obscured as he followed Lisa inside, but I didn't need to see it clearly to know what was happening. My whole body went cold. The footage jumped to the living room camera, and there they were. Lisa laughed at something he said, touching his arm as they stood close, too close. She poured them both drinks from the bar cart in the corner, her movement smooth, practiced, comfortable, like this wasn't the first time. They clinked their glasses together, smiling at each other in a way that made my stomach twist into knots. Then, after a few minutes of idle conversation, Lisa set her glass down and leaned in. The man did the same, and before I could even process what I was watching, they were kissing. Not hesitantly, not with guilt, but with familiarity, like they had done this before, like they had been doing it for a long time. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. My ears started ringing, my hands clenching into fists as I watched Lisa, my wife, press herself against him, her fingers trailing down his chest, his hands moving over her body like he had every right to touch her. I slammed the laptop shut, breathing heavily, my entire body shaking. I had spent so long doubting myself, convincing myself that I was imagining things. But there it was. The truth, caught on camera. Lisa wasn't just lying to me. She was bringing him into our home. Rage surged through me, hot and blinding. I wasn't going to sit back and let this happen. Lisa had no idea that I knew, but she was about to find out. I sat there for what felt like hours, staring at the blank screen of my laptop, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. I had always wondered how I would react if I ever found out Lisa was cheating. Would I cry? Would I feel numb? Would I try to reason with her, to demand an explanation, to salvage whatever was left of our marriage? No. There was no sadness, no grief, just rage. A deep, boiling fury that spread through my entire body, making my hands shake and my jaw clench so tightly it felt like my teeth might crack. Lisa, my wife, the woman I had built a life with, the woman I had trusted with everything, had brought another man into our home, into our bed. I pushed back from the desk so fast that the chair scraped against the floor. My mind was already racing ahead, what to do next, how to make her pay for this, how to make sure she never forgot what she had done. I glanced at the clock. She was still here. I took a deep breath, steadying myself, and then I moved. I stormed through the house, heading straight for the bedroom. My chest burned with adrenaline, my hands clenched into fists as I threw open the closet doors. I didn't think, I just acted. I grabbed armfuls of her clothes, her neatly hung dresses, her expensive shoes, the designer bag she had once begged me for. I yanked open drawers, tossing out her folded shirts, her delicate lingerie, the same lingerie she had probably worn for him. The sight of it made me sick. With a growl of disgust, I grabbed everything I could carry and marched straight to the window. And then I threw. The first load of clothes went flying through the air, scattering across the lawn below. The second followed right after, shirts and underwear raining down onto the pavement. I didn't stop. I didn't care if the neighbors saw. I didn't care about anything except one thing, getting her out of my house. By the time I heard the front door open, I was halfway through emptying her nightstand. I didn't stop. Hey, what the hell are you? Lisa's voice cut through the air, sharp and panicked. I turned to face her, breathing heavily, my vision still clouded with fury. She was standing in the doorway, still wearing the same dress she had been in earlier, her purse slung over her shoulder. Behind her, I could see the silhouette of him, the man from the video, hesitating near the front door like the coward he was. I barely even glanced at him. He wasn't my problem. She was. Lisa's eyes darted to the open window, to the pile of her belongings scattered outside, and then back to me. What the fuck are you doing? She snapped, her voice rising. I let out a cold laugh. Oh, I'm sorry. Was I supposed to let you keep sleeping in my house while you fucked your little boyfriend behind my back? I gestured toward the front door. Go on, Lisa. Don't keep him waiting. Her face went pale. Wait, you. I cut her off. I know. The words were like a slap. I saw it in the way her lips parted, the way her hands clenched at her sides, the way panic flickered across her face. I saw everything, I continued, my voice dangerously low. The cameras. You remember those, don't you? The ones you must have thought I never checked? I took a step closer, my fury radiating off me like heat. I watched you bring him into my house. I watched you. Lisa's mouth opened and closed, struggling for words. I can explain. I laughed again, louder this time. Oh, please. Don't insult me any more than you already have. I turned away from her, grabbed the last of her things, and shoved them into her arms. Get out. Tears welled in her eyes, but I felt nothing. Not pity, not remorse, not regret. Just disgust. Please, let's just talk about this. Talk? I scoffed, shaking my head. Lisa, we are past talking. You made your choice the moment you let him into our bed. I took a step back, exhaling sharply. Now, get out before I throw you out with the rest of your shit. She hesitated for a fraction of a second. Maybe she thought she could still fix this. Maybe she thought she could manipulate me into forgiving her. But then I pointed at the door. And just like that, she was gone. The door slammed behind her, and I stood there, chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. I waited, listening to the sound of their footsteps fading into the night. Then, finally, there was silence. Lisa was out of my house, out of my life. And for the first time in weeks, I felt free. The silence after she left was deafening. For a long time, I just stood there in the middle of the bedroom, my chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. The room still smelled like her, faint traces of perfume lingering in the air, the sheets on the bed still slightly rumpled from where she had slept the night before. But now, she was gone, and I had made damn sure she wasn't coming back. I walked over to the window, looking down at the front yard. Lisa was standing there, frozen in the glow of the streetlights, her bags scattered across the pavement. Her lover, the stranger she had chosen over me, stood awkwardly beside her, shifting on his feet like he wasn't sure what to do next. I hoped he was worth it. Lisa turned back toward the house, and for a second, our eyes met through the glass. There was something in her expression, shock, disbelief, maybe even regret, but I didn't care. I didn't feel sorry for her. I didn't feel sorry for myself, either. I just felt done. She said something, but I couldn't hear her. It didn't matter. I reached up and pulled the curtains shut. I didn't watch to see if she left. I didn't care where she went. She was no longer my problem. The house felt empty without her, and yet, for the first time in weeks, I could breathe. I poured myself a drink and sat down on the couch, letting the exhaustion settle into my bones. My hands were still shaking from the adrenaline, my mind replaying the night over and over in sharp, jagged pieces, the video, the betrayal, the way she had looked at me when she realized I knew. I had spent so much time doubting myself, wondering if I was overreacting, convincing myself that Lisa would never do something like this. But she had. And now, it was over. The weight of it all hit me at once. I wasn't married anymore. Not in any way that mattered. Lisa and I had built a life together, years of memories, of laughter, of love, and in the span of a single night, it had all crumbled into nothing. I thought about the first time I met her. The way she had smiled at me, the way she had made me feel like the luckiest man in the world. It was hard to reconcile that version of her with the woman who had just walked out of my house, begging for a conversation that I would never give her. Had she ever really loved me? Or had she just been waiting for something better to come along? I didn't know. And maybe I never would. I picked up my phone and scrolled to my dad's number. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the call button. What was I supposed to say? Hey, Dad, Lisa cheated, and I threw her out. How's your week been? Instead, I sent a text. It's over. I caught her. She's gone. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed. Proud of you, son. Call me when you're ready. I exhaled slowly, rubbing a hand over my face. I wasn't ready to talk yet. Not about this. Not about her. But I would be. One day. That night, I slept in the guest room. The bed felt strange beneath me, unfamiliar, but I couldn't bring myself to lie in our bed, not after what I had seen. I stared at the ceiling for hours, my mind cycling through every stage of grief, from anger to disbelief to something dangerously close to sadness. But I didn't cry. Not for Lisa. She had made her choice. And now, it was time for me to make mine. The next morning, I woke up early. I showered, got dressed, and made a list of everything I needed to do. First, I was calling a lawyer. I wanted the divorce papers in her hands before she even had time to come up with an excuse. Next, I was changing the locks, just in case. And after that? I didn't know. Maybe I'd take a walk, go to the gym, call my brother, and tell him everything so he could curse Lisa's name for me. But one thing was certain. Lisa was out of my life. And for the first time in a long time, my future belonged to me. The first few days after Lisa left were strangely quiet. The house felt bigger, emptier, like it had lost some of its warmth overnight. But I refused to let that feeling linger. I refused to let her absence haunt me. I did everything I said I would. I called a lawyer and got the divorce papers drawn up. I changed the locks, packed up whatever she had left behind, and dropped it off at her sister's house with a simple message: tell Lisa I never want to see her again. I didn't want to hear her apologies. I didn't want to know if she regretted it. Whatever she felt, guilt, shame, or nothing at all, was no longer my problem. For the first time in years, I was living for myself. My family and friends rallied around me in a way I hadn't expected. My dad took me out for drinks. My brother showed up unannounced with beer and a baseball bat, just in case you want to go break something, and my best friend called every day just to check in. And then there were the texts from Lisa. At first, they were short. Please, let's talk. I made a mistake. Can we just meet once? Then they turned desperate. I don't know who I am without you. I'll do anything to fix this. Please, just tell me what I can do. I never responded. She had already done enough. The first night I truly felt free came 2 weeks later. I went to the gym for the first time in months, pushing my body until my muscles ached. Afterward, I sat in my car, drenched in sweat, and stared at my reflection in the rearview mirror. I looked different. Not because of the workout, not because of the exhaustion, but because, for the first time in a long time, I recognized myself again. I wasn't Lisa's husband anymore. I was just me. And that was enough. The divorce went through quickly. Lisa didn't fight for anything, not the house, not the money, not even for another chance. Maybe she knew she didn't deserve one. Or maybe she had already moved on. I didn't care either way. All that mattered was that she was out of my life for good. Months passed. The pain dulled, the memories faded, and the weight on my chest slowly disappeared. I redecorated the house, rearranged the furniture, and got rid of every little thing that reminded me of her. And one day, I woke up and realized I hadn't thought about her at all the night before. That was the day I knew I had one. Because she had taken everything from me, my trust, my love, my past. But she didn't take my future. That still belonged to me. And it was just getting started. Bye-bye.